But let's talk about the story that's going to get us in trouble. Here we go. Exclusive from the Daily Mail. They say COVID-19, quote, has no credible natural ancestor and was created by Chinese scientists who then tried to cover their tracks with, quote, retro engineering to make it seem like it naturally arose from bats. Explosive new study claims. They say the study researchers found unique fingerprints in COVID-19 samples they say could only have arisen from manipulation in a laboratory. Now, I will stress, we've already heard this last year. And you had that one guy, Luke, I can't remember his name. He's a famous virologist, won the Nobel Peace Prize, said the same thing. They called him a crackpot. They called him a conspiracy theorist. We've heard similar things before. We're hearing it again. And the weirdest thing right now is there's a bunch of journalists that are like, there's no evidence lab leak is real. There's all the evidence that it was natural, zoologic, transfer or whatever. And I'm like, all right, let me break down all y'all let me break down where we're at so far. Okay. I'm going to start with the timeline as we know it now, not what's the timeline of the reporting. U.S. provided funding to EcoHealth Alliance. Money from that pool went to the Wuhan lab for what's called gain of function research, where they tried to make viruses gain functions. The idea is that by making a virus stronger, we'll understand it before it emerges in the wild. So that's happening. Then around November 2019, some people got sick. Videos came out, reports came out suggesting that at some point people had been bitten by a bat or bats had peed on somebody. So then a few months later, we start getting reports of this sickness emerging in Wuhan. It starts spreading, and then we start getting speculation that it's from the wet market across the street from the Wuhan lab. Already people are asking questions. Could it have emerged? And, I said often, look, if it's a bat coronavirus, people in a wet market it's unsanitary. Actually, I would argue that makes more sense simply because a biolab still has security. A wet market doesn't. So if you told me to put $100 down, I'd be like, the place with no security. Why would I bet on the place with security? But then when you factor in the fact that they were doing gain of function research on bat coronaviruses, when you factor in that people were getting sick, everything starts to line up. Now we got Fauci himself saying he's not convinced it occurred naturally, and then we get the story. They go on to say, Daily Mail exclusively obtained a 22-page paper authored by the British professor Angus Dalgleish and Norwegian scientist Dr. Birger Sorensen, set to be published in the Quarterly Review of Biophysics Discovery. The studies show that there's evidence to suggest Chinese scientists created the virus while working on a gain-of-function project at the Wuhan lab. Gain-of-function research, which was temporarily outlawed in the U.S., involves altering naturally occurring viruses to make them more infectious in order to study their potential effects on humans. According to the paper, Chinese scientists took a natural coronavirus backbone found in Chinese cave bats and spliced onto it a new spike, turning it into the deadly and highly transmissible COVID-19. The researchers who concluded that COVID-19 has no credible natural ancestor also believe scientists reverse engineered versions of the virus to cover up their tracks. Quote, "We think that there have been retro engineered viruses created," Dalgleish told DailyMail.com. "They've changed the virus, then tried to make out it was a sequence years ago." The study also points to deliberate destruction, concealment, or contamination of data in Chinese labs and notes that scientists who wish to share their findings haven't been able to do so or have disappeared. Now that's where it gets a little weird. I'd like to read about that because it sounded a bit conspiratorial. Until recently, most experts have staunchly denied the origins of the virus were anything other than natural infection leaping from animals to human. Earlier this week, Dr. Anthony Fauci defended U.S. funding of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, saying the $600,000 grant was not approved for gain-of-function research. And I also want to make sure we absolutely stress, Fauci bombshell, as reported by thehill.com, not convinced COVID-19 developed naturally outside Wuhan lab. Just take that quote from Fauci. All right, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna say, I don't know about this study. Maybe the study's not true. I don't know. All right, YouTube's banned people for less, but Fauci said he's not convinced it developed naturally outside the lab. If the first reported cases were from outside the lab, but it didn't develop naturally outside the lab, then it stands to reason the lab leak hypothesis is true and it was manufactured in the lab. Or unless Fauci's wrong again.
It developed naturally in the lab.
How does it develop naturally in a lab?
I don't know. But
that is an option.
That's like the logic follows that could also be a possibility.
The moment they put the virus in the lab, let's say they found the virus in a bat. and they put the bat in the lab, and they put the bat in a box, and then the virus mutates. That's lab engineered. They change the conditions of the bat. That's the bare minimum for me, I suppose.
Look, this is a tremendous, horrible slander of the wet market community.
I mean, it is. No,
And I mean, imagine the guy who owns that wet market.
is it one guy?
Man, is it one guy? I don't know. Maybe he's the one guy who subleases to all the other wet marketeers.
Did you see that New York Times reporter who said that Lab Leak was racist?
Sure.
Of course.
Well, no. I mean, what's more racist, Lab Leak or wet market?
Exactly. So that's what's funny. The reporter for the New York Times who's covering COVID tweeted that one day we'll stop talking about Lab Leak and discuss the racist origins or whatever. And then people were like, the wet market is more racist. You know, like the lab is plausible in that labs have accidents.
Could happen
But
anywhere.
then to accuse the Chinese people of having these filthy, disease-ridden markets is
well,
like...
it's because we eat bats.
I mean, yeah, that's not
But did
nice.
they really? I thought that was like an urban legend. Or like a myth that they were eating bats. Like people were saying bat soup, and then I guess...
Yeah.
What are you selling live bats for at a wet market?
Were
if
they
you're
actually
not gonna
selling
eat
bats?
it? I don't know. I mean, this is all coming from media reports and all that nonsense that came out initially. We heard about the wet market, we heard about the bats, and people joking about bat soup and all this stuff, and of course then the media backlash. Oh my God, all this is racist.
Yep.
Of
So
course.
don't talk about it. It's all racist.
It's the weirdest thing. And I guess it's because they hated Trump, and Trump suggested it, so then all of a sudden they had to... I think it's a combination of that. Trump says something, they must say the opposite. But I also think that politically they saw it as a way to go after Trump. If this was a natural phenomenon, it's Trump's fault, and then they can use that to get Trump out.
Think about this though. We have an idea that the media is getting less powerful as alternative media rises. I thought that for a couple of years. I thought that it was declining in power, and what COVID showed me was that these guys are still insanely powerful. I mean, think about this. We have the biggest story in the world. Everyone is hysterical afraid of this virus. And yet we're like a year on and we're only now starting to think, hey, how did this thing happen? I mean,
right.
In what world is that? 9/11 happens immediately as soon as the rubble is cleared. No, not even. I was in New York. The sky is full of clouds. It's like, all right, who did it?
Right.
How'd this happen? Who did it? And for this, we go a year and nothing.
And it's not just the media though. Clearly, the media is a component of an establishment power. That's they either because they are pressured by each other, they're scared of being ostracized. CNN says something, YouTube says that's the truth. We decided. If CNN says it, it's true. And so you go on YouTube and you make some claims about the election, they'll ban you. You make some claims about COVID, they'll ban you. But for 4 years, the media could go on YouTube and make the most outrageous, nonsensical claims about Donald Trump, and it was totally acceptable.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll tell you this. I've made the point that social media has empowered the individual, but like I stated in the opening when I was doing the promo spot, CNN gets hundreds of millions of views on YouTube. Why? Because YouTube guarantees that if you search for news, they will send you CNN. It's not just that they've decided CNN is the truth. They've decided it's the only thing you're allowed to watch. So how do we combat that? People just got to keep talking as much as you can, I guess.
And it's even worse than that because you've got an entire industry now that has developed let's say the so-called disinformation industry, which is really just a mutation of the old countering violent extremism industry during the war on terror. It's basically the same people.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They've retooled themselves and they've created metrics and all kinds of justifications for saying, no, CNN is authoritative, but Tim Pool is not disinformation.
Well, so Google told me I could become authoritative if I chose to do it. There's a process you go through. You have to fill out forms and then submit something, and then they put you in their authoritative list. So it's possible. The challenge is that it's an obvious institutional bias. So I do believe YouTube likes me more than other channels.
Well,
I
sure,
do,
because you get a lot of views.
Maybe, but I certainly think that there are smaller channels that are still decently sized that have gotten strikes for saying similar things to me. And, we're running a risk here simply talking about the story because YouTube, they go nuts. I mean, Crowder cited the CDC data and then they nuked him.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, I also think that you've created such a nice, serious infrastructure around the show with the house and the equipment and the team and everything. I mean, that I think that for YouTube and some of these, let's just say for YouTube, they look at this and they say, this is a story that we want told.
Right.
We want someone like Tim Pool to be able to make a living and to thrive on this platform.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's not
because if you get you get yanked and you get banned, that's a big story.
Right. And it's bad for business.
It's bad for business.
YouTube is a very dangerous place to run a business. Facebook is a very dangerous place to run a business. And actually YouTube did a survey. They sent me this everybody got it probably if you're a YouTuber. And it's like, fill out our survey, and it asked me questions about what platforms I use. And I'm like, I use, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And then it's like, how do you feel about them? How confident are you? And I'm just like, oh, not at all. Like Twitter, like, do you feel safe using that? No way. No. Do you think they have your best interest? Absolutely not. And then for YouTube, I'm like, YouTube is definitely not a safe place for a business. It does provide an opportunity for reach and for revenue, but YouTube could ban you at any moment without notice, and they've done it before. They did it to a guy named Mumkey Jones. He had no strikes. He broke no rules, and they deleted all of his channels without warning because they found his content distasteful. That was it. He broke no rules. He just made it was black comedy, and they didn't like it. I'll leave it there. It's spicy comedy,
edgy.
But it wasn't racist. It was just it was like the edge of edgy. And they deleted his channel outright. So this is the world we live in right now, where of course YouTube wants people to believe you can be a creator so long as you follow these rigid guidelines we don't explain to you. I mean, we
will change at any moment.
Right. We just learned this is really interesting from Project Veritas too. I don't know if you saw this, where they had the whistleblower come out and they say that publicly Facebook's guidelines are very vague. Internally, they're extremely well defined. And they do that so that way when they ban someone, they can, this rule is violated for this reason, and they can just make it whatever they want.
Right. So, I mean, Twitter's the same. Twitter operates exactly the same way. I was, a few years ago, I was in a back and forth at length with some Twitter folks. Folks who work at the company whose job it was, they saw, hey, you know what, let's reach out to conservatives who are, who have a platform online, and I went at them and I said, look, you're shadow banning, you're doing all of these things, you're throttling the amount of views that people will get, that viewers will get, and they denied all of this, but they admitted to having, I think, some 300 different metrics or types of metrics that will decide who you are based on behaviors.
Right.
So that they can look you in the eye and they say, we do not ban conservatives.
It is the stupidest lie. And the issue, I guess, is I don't know why any conservative would believe them, and I don't know why any conservative would argue with them. I've argued with them, but we know they're lying. They know we know they're lying, and they know we know they know they're lying. They know we know they know we know they're lying.
Yes.
Yeah, I wrote a piece about it at the Federalist, I think in 2018, describing this whole back and forth, and I told them, my Twitter hasn't grown more than, I don't know, 200, 300 in the last 9 months. It's obvious that something is going on because of how exponential growth works.
Right.
And the guy looked at me and said, maybe your tweets just aren't so good. We can offer you a class on how to tweet better.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the chutzpah.
Yeah.
And this guy had 400 followers or something, and he's talking to me, and it's like, I mean, it's so obvious that the finger is on the scale. It's so obvious that this is going on. It's not even debatable. But of course, you've got, we went through 4 years of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Where I knew this was a problem in January of 2017. I mean, I'm not special. A lot of people saw that this was an issue, and nothing was done.
The Republicans didn't do anything about it when they had the power to
Nothing.
do it.
Nothing.
And they're not going to now. We get hearing after hearing after hearing. They don't do anything.
Oh, at the federal level, absolutely not. At the federal level, all these guys. So DeSantis. So I was there at the bill signing. I was there at the bill signing, and it was great. The room was electric, because everybody knows what is up here. Everybody knows. It used to be that it's like, okay, Milo, Alex Jones, these people who, you'd never meet in a million years, but they got banned. But now it's grandma getting banned.
Yeah, it's people who are just saying, learn to code, making
Right.
jokes. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.